On a remote farm, a nanny interrupts her dreams to care for a girl marked by loss. A fire puts the child's life at risk, and the young woman throws herself into the flames without hesitation. The heroic rescue ignites tensions, provokes intrigue, and shakes fragile alliances within the house. But from the ashes, a school is born, a new family, and the certainty that true love transforms everything. It was a hot summer afternoon at Willow Creek Ranch, on the outskirts of Maplewood, when the unexpected happened. The flames started small, and within minutes engulfed the old wooden barn where Clara, the 7-year-old daughter of farmer Rafael Mendoza, used to play. The fire spread with terrifying speed, consuming everything around it, while thick smoke billowed out through the cracks of the century-old structure. Louisa Sterling, the 25-year-old nanny, who had been working on the ranch for just over 6 months, was hanging clothes on the nearby line when she heard the girl's desperate screams. Without a second thought, she dropped the sheets she was holding and ran towards the burning barn. "Clara! Clara, where are you?" she shouted, trying to make herself heard amidst the crackling fire and the crashing sound of the collapsing timber. The ranch hands, alerted by the smoke that could already be seen from afar, ran towards the barn, but Louisa was the first to arrive. Without hesitation, she covered her face with the apron she was wearing and entered the inferno that had formed. The heat was suffocating. The smoke burned her eyes and lungs. Every breath was a battle against asphyxiation. "Aunt Lou! Aunt Lou, help!" Clara's voice came from behind a pile of hay in the furthest corner of the barn. Louisa advanced blindly, guided only by the sound of the girl's sobs. When she finally found her, Clara was huddled, trembling, her face stained with soot and tears. In her small hands, a burnt matchstick revealed the accidental origin of that tragedy. "Come, my love, I'll get you out of here," Louisa said, lifting the girl into her arms and pressing her against her chest. The way back seemed endless. The roof was beginning to collapse, and the air grew thinner and thinner. Louisa felt her lungs burn, but she didn't loosen her embrace on Clara. She protected her with her own body as she moved towards the exit, which now looked like a small point of light amidst the chaos. They were almost reaching the door when a burning beam detached from the ceiling, falling on them. Louisa felt a searing pain as the incandescent timber touched her back. Her clothes began to catch fire, but in a desperate act, she threw herself to the ground and rolled, still holding Clara firmly so the girl wouldn't get hurt. Just as both managed to stumble out of the barn, Rafael Mendoza arrived at the scene, driving his jeep down the dirt road at full speed. The 40-year-old farmer, whose face bore the marks of much suffering, froze as he saw the sight, his daughter, safe and sound in Louisa's arms, who could barely stand. "Clara, my God, Clara," he exclaimed, running towards the two. The girl, seeing her father, extended her arms, but did not let go of Louisa's hand. Rafael hugged his daughter with relief, and at the same time held the nanny, who was beginning to faint. "Quick! We need to take her to the hospital." He ordered the employees, who had already arrived with buckets of water, to fight the fire. Within minutes, Rafael placed Louisa in the back seat of the jeep, with Clara still clinging to the nanny's hand. The girl refused to be separated from the one who had risked her own life to save her. "It'll be all right, Clara. Aunt Lou will get better. I promise." Rafael tried to calm his daughter as he drove at full speed down the dirt road leading to town. At the Maplewood Hospital, Louisa was immediately attended to. The burns on her back and arms were severe, but not life-threatening. Clara had suffered only minor scratches and slight smoke inhalation. The doctor recommended that both spend the night under observation. Rafael did not leave Louisa's side for a second. He accompanied every procedure, every dressing, every medication. He held her hand when the pain was strongest and whispered words of gratitude and encouragement. Clara, for her part, refused to leave the room and fell asleep in the armchair beside the nanny's bed, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny, which her father had retrieved from the ranch. As he watched over Louisa and Clara's sleep, Rafael was surprised by the arrival of his fiancée, Patricia Nolan, a businesswoman from Sterling City who spent weekends at the ranch. Tall, elegant, and always impeccably dressed, Patricia contrasted with the simplicity of that rural hospital. "My love, what a tragedy. I just heard from the caretaker. How is Clara?" she asked, embracing Rafael briefly, but soon pulling away as she noticed the smell of smoke that still clung to his clothes. "She's fine. Thank God. And thanks to Louisa," Raphael replied, not taking his eyes off the sleeping Nanny. "If it weren't for her." Patricia observed the scene with growing discomfort. Her fiancé, one of the most prosperous farmers in the region, sitting beside an employee's bed, holding her hand as if his life depended on it, and his future stepdaughter, sleeping peacefully beside the Nanny with an expression of serenity she rarely showed when she was only with her. "And when are you bringing them home?" "I'm sure they'll be more comfortable there," Patricia said, trying to disguise the jealousy that was beginning to gnaw at her chest. "The doctor wants them to stay under observation tonight." "Tomorrow, if all is well, we can go," Raphael explained, finally looking at his fiancée. "You can go to the ranch to rest. I'll stay here with them." Patricia felt her blood run cold. Never in 2 years of their relationship had Raphael spoken to her in such a direct manner, almost dismissing her presence. He had always been kind, attentive, though reserved since the loss of his wife in a car accident 5 years earlier. "Of course, you must be exhausted." "I'll get some clean clothes and come back in the morning," she replied, maintaining her composure. She leaned in to kiss her fiancé and, as she did, noticed that his gaze had already returned to Louisa's sleeping face. Upon leaving the hospital, Patricia sat in her imported car and let the tears of anger flow freely. Something had changed that day, something that threatened all her plans for the future, and she would not allow a simple country nanny to destroy everything she had fought for. Louisa Sterling grew up on the outskirts of Greenfield, the only child of Mrs. Zelda, a cleaning lady who raised the girl alone after her father disappeared when she was just 5 years old. From an early age, she learned the value of honest work and dignity. By 18, she was already dividing her time between studying pedagogy at the public university and various temporary jobs to supplement her mother's income, as her mother had begun to experience health problems. It was on a rainy March afternoon that Louisa's life changed drastically. Mrs. Zelda, who had been experiencing severe pain for weeks, finally agreed to see a doctor. The diagnosis came as a blow: advanced breast cancer. Treatment needed to start immediately, but the cost of medications and special care was far beyond what they could afford. Desperate, Louisa temporarily dropped out of college and started working 2 jobs. That's when she saw the ad in the local newspaper. Full-time live-in nanny wanted for a ranch on the outskirts of Maplewood. Good salary and accommodation included. The offer was perfect. The salary would allow her to pay for her mother's treatment, and the accommodation would solve the issue of rent, which consumed a large part of their income. With a heavy heart at leaving Mrs. Zelda in the care of a kind neighbor, Louisa accepted the job offer at Willow Creek Ranch. Her first meeting with Rafael Mendonça was brief and formal. The farmer, a man of few words and a distant gaze, interviewed her in his office filled with photographs of prize-winning horses and rodeo trophies. Among the images of professional success, there was only one family photo: Raphael, a woman with a radiant smile and a baby in her arms. Clara is 7 years old now. She's a good girl, but she's had difficulty connecting with people since we've been alone, Raphael explained, without going into detail about what had happened to his wife. She's already had 3 nannies in the last 2 years. None of them truly managed to connect with her. Louisa felt a pang in her chest. She knew well the pain of growing up without a parent. "May I meet her now?" The first meeting with Clara was challenging. The girl, hidden behind a tree in the orchard, refused to greet the new nanny. "I don't need anyone looking after me. I'm a big girl now," she declared, with the characteristic determination of someone who had grown up too fast. Instead of insisting, Louisa sat on the grass and began to make a wreath of wildflowers that grew nearby. Without saying a word, she simply hummed a song from her childhood as she worked. Gradually, curiosity overcame Clara's resistance, and she approached to see what the young woman was doing. "Do you know how to make one of these?" Louisa asked, handing over the finished wreath. Clara shook her head negatively, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Do you want me to teach you?" From that simple gesture, a connection was born that would grow with time. In the following months, Louisa discovered that behind the facade of a rebellious and independent girl, Clara hid a world of insecurities and fears. The greatest of them, being abandoned again as had happened when her mother left forever. The ranch, which had once been a place of heavy silences and mechanical routines, began to come alive. Clara's laughter echoed through the corridors of the main house. The garden gained a colorful swing, and even Raphael, always so reserved, gradually lowered his defenses. Sunday afternoons, once spent by Clara in front of the television, while her father worked in his office, transformed into picnics in the orchard, fishing trips in the property's stream, and storytelling sessions in the shade of the trumpet trees that gave the ranch its name. Raphael, initially resistant to these activities, eventually yielded to his daughter's insistent invitations and began to participate more and more. On one of those afternoons, while Clara ran after butterflies, Raphael and Louisa sat in the shade of a century-old trumpet tree. "I've never seen Clara so happy," he commented, watching his daughter play. "You have a special gift with children." Louisa smiled, feeling her face flush slightly at the unexpected compliment. "Clara is special. She just needed someone who understood her pain. And you understand. I lost my father when I was about her age. I know what it's like to create a world of fantasies to escape reality." Raphael remained silent for a few moments, as if pondering whether or not to continue that conversation. Finally, with a choked voice, he recounted, "Helen was in an accident on the road connecting the ranch to town. She was returning from a doctor's appointment with Clara, who was only 2 years old. The car skidded on the wet road and—" his voice failed. "Clara was in the back seat and was unharmed. But Helen didn't make it. Since then, I've tried to be both father and mother, but I've failed miserably at being either." Louisa felt a deep empathy for that strong man who was now showing his vulnerability. Without thinking, she lightly touched his hand in solidarity. "You haven't failed. Clara is an incredible, intelligent and brave girl. That shows how good a father you've been." That brief moment of connection did not go unnoticed by Patricia Nolan, who arrived by surprise at the ranch that Sunday. From a distance, she observed her fiancé and the nanny sitting under the tree, too close for her liking, conversing with an intimacy that she, in 2 years of relationship, had never managed to establish with Raphael. Patricia had met Raphael at a cattle auction in Sterling City. Daughter of an influential banker and owner of a chain of luxury boutiques in the capital, she saw in the widowed farmer not just an attractive man, but an opportunity to expand her business into the countryside. The romance developed more due to her insistence than his initiative, but after a year of dates, Raphael finally gave in and proposed to her, more out of consideration for Clara's need for a maternal figure than out of true love. The relationship between Patricia and Clara had always been distant. The businesswoman, accustomed to the glamour of Sterling City, and without any experience with children, didn't know how to deal with the quiet and shy girl. Her attempts at rapprochement, usually through expensive gifts, never had the desired effect. And now, seeing Clara run happily through the orchard, laughing at the nanny in a way she had never done for her, Patricia felt a pang of jealousy that would soon turn into something much more destructive. That night, during dinner in the main house, Patricia made a point of asserting her position as the future lady of the ranch. She asked Louisa to serve the wine, corrected her posture when setting the cutlery. Helen made comments about the simplicity of her clothes. "Perhaps we can all chip in to buy you more suitable clothes, Louisa. After all, you represent the Mendonza family when you go out with Clara," she suggested, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Raphael, annoyed by his fiancé's behavior, intervened. "Louisa is perfectly suited for her role, Patricia, and if she needs anything, she just has to tell me. No collection is necessary." The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by Clara, who for the first time directly confronted her future stepmother. "Aunt Lou doesn't need new clothes. She's beautiful just the way she is. And she's not an employee, she's my friend." Patricia paled at the girl's boldness. Raphael, surprised by his daughter's reaction but secretly proud, tried to hide a smile. Louisa, for her part, felt the weight of being at the center of a family dispute that could cost her job and her mother's treatment. The tense atmosphere of that night was just the prelude to the difficult days to come. Unbeknownst to Louisa, Patricia was already formulating a plan in her mind to remove the nanny from the ranch and from Raphael and Clara's lives. A plan that would involve lies, manipulations, and the exploitation of the farmer's insecurities who, despite his strong demeanor, still carried open wounds from the loss of his wife and the fear of failing as a father. Clara dropped her fork, making a noise that drew everyone's attention to the table. "I don't want to live in Sterling City. I don't want to leave the ranch," she exclaimed, her eyes welling up. "And I don't want Aunt Patricia to be my mother." A heavy silence fell over the table. Raphael, clearly embarrassed, tried to calm his daughter. "Clara, nobody said we're moving to Sterling City, and you don't have to call Patricia Mom if you don't want to. But Grandma said, your grandmother is just excited about the wedding," Patricia interjected, casting a warning glance at Mrs. Matilda. "Of course, we'll continue living here, darling. Although a few months in Sterling City wouldn't hurt anyone, would it, Raphael?" Before the farmer could respond, Clara abruptly got up from the table. "May I leave, Dad? I promised to show Aunt Lou the new foals." Raphael nodded, relieved by the opportunity to end that tense conversation. Clara took Louisa by the hand and practically dragged her out of the house, leaving the adults in a silence heavy with unspoken words. In the stable, far from the eyes and ears of the main house, Clara finally let her tears flow freely. "I don't want my dad to marry Aunt Patricia," she sobbed, stroking one of the newborn foals. "She doesn't really like me. And she doesn't like the ranch. She'll make Dad sell everything and we'll leave." Louisa hugged the girl, feeling her heart break for her suffering. As much as she also had her reservations about Patricia, she knew it wasn't her place to interfere with Raphael's personal life plans. "Your father loves you more than anything in the world. Clara, he would never do anything to make you unhappy. Then why is he going to marry her?" The simple, direct question caught Louisa off guard. Why indeed had Raphael chosen Patricia as his partner? The two seemed so different, with such distant values and aspirations. But again, it wasn't her place to question her employer's choices. Sometimes adults make decisions that children don't understand right away. "But I'm sure your father only wants what's best for both of you." Clara didn't seem convinced, but she dried her tears and continued stroking the foal in silence. After a few minutes, she looked up, determined. "Aunt Lou, do you promise you won't leave, even if Aunt Patricia and Grandma Matilda don't like you?" The question hit Louisa like a punch to the stomach. She had noticed, of course, Patricia's veiled hostility, and now Mrs. Matilda's, but until that moment, she hadn't imagined it was so obvious that a 7-year-old would notice. "I promise I'll stay as long as your father wants me to, Clara, and as long as you need me." What Louisa didn't know was that at that very moment in the main house, her future on the ranch was being decided without her knowledge or consent. After Clara and Louisa left, Mrs. Matilda wasted no time in steering the conversation to the matter that had truly brought her to the ranch. "Raphael, as an experienced businessman, you should be more cautious about the people you bring into your home, near your daughter." The farmer frowned, confused. "What do you mean, Mrs. Matilda?" Patricia and Raphael's ex-mother-in-law exchanged a knowing glance before Mrs. Matilda continued. "This Louisa, Patricia did some investigations into her. She discovered quite disturbing things." "Investigations? What kind of investigations?" Raphael straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. "Darling, I was just worried about Clara," Patricia interjected, placing her hand on Raphael's. "A young, beautiful woman like Louisa, without reliable previous references, who suddenly gets so close to you and Clara. I didn't think it was prudent to simply accept her story without checking." "And what exactly did you verify?" Raphael's voice took on a dangerously calm tone. Patricia hesitated, as if pondering whether or not to continue. It was Mrs. Matilda who spoke. She worked for a family in Greenfield before coming here. She was fired after becoming romantically involved with her employer, a married man. There was also an incident with some disappearing jewelry. The family didn't file a formal complaint to avoid scandal, but "That's absurd," Raphael exclaimed, standing up from the table. "I've known Louisa for almost a year. She's dedicated, honest, and risked her own life to save Clara. You expect me to believe these slanders?" "They're not slanders, Raphael," Patricia insisted, keeping her voice controlled. "I have proof. I spoke with her former employer on the phone. I can put you in touch with that person if you wish. I'm just trying to protect you and Clara." Raphael ran a hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. Could it be possible that he was so wrong about Louisa? That the woman who had been secretly stealing his heart was an opportunist? No, he couldn't believe it. But why would Patricia invent such a story? "I need to hear Louisa's side before drawing any conclusions," he finally said. "Of course, darling. That's fair," Patricia agreed, exchanging another glance with Mrs. Matilda. "But perhaps it's better to wait for the right moment. We don't want to create a tense atmosphere in front of Clara, do we?" Raphael nodded, still stunned by the revelations. In his heart, a battle raged between the trust he felt for Louisa and the doubts planted by Patricia and Mrs. Matilda. What he didn't know was that the seeds of distrust once planted grow quickly and can suffocate even the purest feeling. And while he fought against his own uncertainties, in the stable, far away, Louisa made a promise to Clara that she might not be able to keep, the promise to stay by her side no matter what. Raphael sat down again, running a hand through his hair in a gesture Louisa knew well. He always did that when he was especially troubled or confused. "I'll do that," he finally said. "I'll verify your story. But there's another matter, a more delicate one." Louisa waited, feeling her heart pound against her chest. "Clara is very attached to you, perhaps too attached. She practically talks about nothing else, and it's been difficult for Patricia to establish a bond with her while I watch her. Do my job, take care of Clara as if she were my own daughter. That's what you hired me for, wasn't it?" The words came out harsher than Louisa intended, but the injustice of the situation made her lose her usual composure. Raphael seemed surprised by her reaction. "Yes, of course. And you've done an exceptional job, Louisa. Clara has changed completely since you arrived. She's smiling again, playing, opening up. It's just that your fiancé feels threatened by me," Louisa finished, risking everything in that moment of frankness. "Not because of who I am, but because of the role I play in Clara's life. And perhaps in yours." The silence that followed was charged with tension. For a few moments, Raphael's eyes fixed on Louisa's with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. There was something there, something unsaid, unadmitted, but palpable like the air they breathed. Finally, Raphael looked away and stood up, ending the conversation. "As I said, I'll check your background. Until then, I hope you understand that I need to be cautious. Clara is my priority. Clara is my priority too, sir. Always has been." With those words, Louisa left the office, feeling simultaneously exhausted and relieved. She hadn't fallen into Patricia's trap. Raphael hadn't tried the emotional test that Mrs. Carmine had mentioned. Instead, he had confronted her directly, which, despite the painful situation, showed that he still held some respect for her. At the office door, she almost bumped into Patricia, who had clearly been listening to the conversation. The triumphant smile on Raphael's fiancé's face said it all. She thought she was winning that silent battle. "Ah, Louisa, we were just talking about you," she said with false cordiality. "Raphael is concerned about Clara's future, now that we're getting married. We thought perhaps it's time to consider a boarding school for her. There are excellent options in Sterling City, and you, of course, would be free to pursue your career." The mention of sending Clara to a boarding school sent a chill down Louisa's spine. The girl who had already suffered the loss of her mother would now be separated from her father, and the only home she knew. This explained why Clara had heard Patricia talking about moving to Sterling City. "With all due respect, madam, I think that's a decision Mr. Mendonza should discuss with Clara first. She loves the ranch and would deeply feel the separation from her father." Patricia narrowed her eyes, letting her mask of sympathy drop. "Raphael and I will decide what's best for Clara. You're just the nanny, dear. The temporary nanny, I might add." Before Louisa could respond, Clara appeared running down the hallway, having escaped math class once again. "Aunt Lou, come see. Bolina had kittens in the barn." Bolina was Clara's pet cat, a stray the girl had adopted against Patricia's wishes, who preferred purebred cats. "Clara, shouldn't you be in class with Miss Eliza?" Patricia asked, trying to adopt a maternal tone that sounded completely false. The girl barely looked at her future stepmother. "Class is over. Can I go, Aunt Lou, please?" Louisa cast an apologetic glance at Patricia and allowed herself to be dragged by Clara towards the barn, grateful for the interruption that had ended that unpleasant confrontation. In the barn, Bolina had indeed given birth to 4 tiny kittens that nestled against her body in the corner of a hay pile. Clara was radiant, kneeling beside the new feline family, watching every movement with fascination. "Look, Aunt Lou, they're so tiny. Can I keep them all?" Louisa smiled, momentarily forgetting the worries that plagued her. "I think your father would go crazy with 5 cats in the house. Clara, but I'm sure he'll let you keep at least one." The girl seemed to consider this for a moment, before turning her attention back to the kittens. "Aunt Lou, I heard a bit of the conversation between you and my father in the office. About you leaving." Louisa's smile faded. "Clara, you shouldn't listen to other people's conversations." "I know, but I was worried. Aunt Patricia told Grandma Matilda that she was going to make you leave." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want you to go. I don't want to go to a boarding school in Sterling City. I want to stay here with you and Daddy." Louisa sat beside Clara, feeling her heart break for the girl's anguish. How to explain the complexities of adult relationships to a 7-year-old? How to promise she would stay when her own future on the ranch was so uncertain? "Clara, listen. Your father loves you more than anything in the world. He only wants the best for you. And I promise that as long as I can, I'll be by your side. But what if Aunt Patricia convinces him to send me away? And what if he marries her and doesn't like me anymore?" The simplicity of the question hid a very real and deep fear. Louisa hugged Clara tightly, feeling the girl's sobs against her chest. "That will never happen, my love. Your father will always love you, no matter what happens. And as for me, well, even if one day I have to leave, I'll always carry you in my heart." At that moment, while comforting Clara among the hay in the barn, with the cat and her kittens as the only witnesses, Louisa made a decision. She would not allow Patricia's lies to distance her from that girl who had become so important in her life. She would fight for the truth, for Raphael's trust, and for Clara's right to grow up happy in the place she loved. What Louisa didn't know was that her struggle would be even more difficult than she imagined. For at that very moment, in the main house's office, Patricia was concluding the second phase of her plan. "Raphael, darling, I know it's hard to believe," she said, feigning consternation. "But listen for yourself." She placed a phone on the table, activating the speakerphone. On the other end of the line, a female voice, clearly rehearsed, confirmed all the accusations against Louisa, the alleged involvement with a former employer, the disappearance of jewelry, the dismissal for inappropriate behavior. Raphael listened to everything in silence, his face growing paler. He wanted to believe Louisa in her sincere gaze, in everything she had done for Clara. But how could he ignore what seemed like such concrete proof? When Raphael and Louisa arrived at the ranch, the sun was already high in the sky. The storm from the previous night had given way to a bright and warm day, as if nature wanted to compensate for the fury it had shown hours earlier. However, the external calm contrasted drastically with the storm that awaited them inside the main house. Patricia was waiting for them on the porch, arms crossed and her face contorted in an expression that mixed anger and triumph. Beside her, Clara watched the scene with frightened eyes, while Mrs. Carmine tried unsuccessfully to take her inside. "So you've finally returned," Patricia said, descending the porch steps with firm strides. "So I hope you enjoyed your nocturnal escapade." Raphael got out of the jeep, confused by his fiancée's obvious hostility. "What are you talking about, Patricia?" "Louisa's mother had a medical emergency. We went to the hospital in Greenfield." "Of course you did," she replied, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And naturally you had to go personally, in the middle of the night during a storm. You couldn't just call a taxi or ask Joe from the stable to take her." Louisa, still exhausted from the sleepless night, felt her stomach sink. The last thing she needed now was to be the pivot of a fight between Raphael and Patricia. All she wanted was a hot shower and some rest, before calling the hospital to check on her mother's condition. "Patricia, it was an emergency," she explained, trying to keep her voice calm. "I apologize for the inconvenience, but my mother is very ill and—" "Spare me the details," Patricia cut in, raising her hand in an imperious gesture. "Your explanations don't interest me. What interests me is that my fiancé went out in the middle of the night with another woman, without even informing me." Raphael took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain his composure. "Patricia, this is not the time for this. Louisa has been through a difficult time in the past few hours. Let her rest, we'll talk later." "No, Raphael, we'll talk now," Patricia insisted, her voice rising dangerously. Because while you were gone, I had a very interesting conversation with Dr. Silas Maxwell from Greenfield. The name meant nothing to Louisa, but she noticed how Raphael's face suddenly paled. "Who?" he asked, confusion evident in his voice. "Mrs. Zelda Sterling's real doctor," Patricia clarified with a triumphant smile, "who informed me that the lady in question never had cancer. In fact, she suffers from hypertension and diabetes, serious conditions, certainly, but very different from terminal cancer that would require expensive treatments which, coincidentally, you offered to pay for." Louisa felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "What are you talking about? My mother has been undergoing cancer treatment for months. I have all the documents, the medical reports." "Falsified, I imagine," Patricia retorted, turning to Raphael. "See how good she is? She almost convinces me, and I already knew the truth." Raphael looked from one to the other, clearly trying to process Patricia's absurd accusations. "How would you have spoken to this doctor? We didn't even know we would be at the hospital last night." "Oh, darling, it wasn't yesterday. I've been investigating our dear Louisa for weeks. I hired a private investigator after the fire incident. I found it. Too convenient that she became a heroine in your eyes." The revelation dropped like a bomb. Raphael took a step back, as if he had been physically hit by Patricia's words. "You hired someone to investigate Louisa, without telling me anything. Why would you do something like that?" "To protect you and Clara, obviously. And look what I discovered. The touching story of her mother with cancer. A lie. The clean past as a nanny? Another lie. She never worked formally before, has no verifiable references. And the pedagogy degree? Also a lie. She dropped out in the first semester due to excessive absences. Every accusation was like a stab for Louisa. How did Patricia know so many details of her life? Some were distortions of the truth, others completely false. But there were enough real details to make the lies more convincing. "That's not true," Louisa protested, feeling tears burn in her eyes. "My mother really does have cancer. I dropped out of college so I could work and pay for her treatment, not because of absences." "Raphael," Patricia continued, completely ignoring Louisa's protests, "she's been manipulating you from the start. First, she won over Clara, knowing that the way to your heart was through your daughter. Then, she invented this illness story to get money. And now this convenient emergency in the middle of the night, when she was about to be unmasked." "Enough!" The shout came from Clara, who until then had been silently observing the scene, clinging to Mrs. Carmine's skirt. The girl ran to Louisa, hugging her tightly. "Aunt Lou isn't a liar. She saved me from the fire. She truly loves me, not like you, who only pretends to like me." "Clara!" exclaimed Raphael, shocked by his daughter's outburst. "It's true, Daddy. I heard Aunt Patricia talking on the phone that she's going to send me to a boarding school when you two get married. She said she has no patience for children and that the ranch is a backward place." A heavy silence fell upon everyone. Raphael looked at Patricia with an expression of disbelief. "Is this true?" Patricia forced a laugh. "Of course not. Clara must have misunderstood. I mentioned excellent schools in Sterling City, but for the future, when she's older. And as for the ranch, I merely commented that some modernizations would be welcome. But the damage was already done." The seed of doubt, which Patricia had so carefully planted against Louisa, was now germinating against herself. "Raphael," Louisa said, her voice trembling but determined, "I can prove that my mother really has cancer. I have all the medical reports, the prescriptions, the payment receipts for the chemotherapy sessions. I wouldn't invent something like that, especially for Clara, who has already suffered so much from the loss of her own mother." "And I can prove she's lying," Patricia retorted, pulling her cell phone from her bag. "I have Dr. Maxwell's number right here. Call him right now." Raphael, who until then had wavered between confusion and disbelief, finally made a decision. "It won't be necessary. I just spent the entire night in a hospital with Louisa. I saw her mother with my own eyes. I spoke with real doctors who confirmed her diagnosis. In fact, I hired a specialist to handle the case." "You what?" Patricia exclaimed, incredulous. "You spent our money on this opportunist's farce?" "Our money?" Raphael repeated, raising his eyebrows. "As far as I know, the money is still mine, Patricia, and I choose to use it to help someone who risked her own life to save my daughter." Patricia's face contorted into a mask of fury. "You're in love with her. That's it, isn't it?" You fell right into this. This one's trap. Be careful what you say in front of my daughter, Raphael warned, with a coldness that made Patricia step back. Realizing she had lost control of the situation, the businesswoman tried to change strategy. Raphael, darling, I'm just worried about you, about Clara, about our future. This woman appeared out of nowhere, and in less than a year she's already living in the main house, has your complete trust, and now she's taking your money. Don't you see the pattern? What I see is one woman desperately trying to save her mother's life, and another trying to destroy someone's reputation out of pure jealousy, Raphael replied, with a clarity that surprised everyone, including himself. At that moment, a familiar car entered the property, Mrs. Matilda's elegant Mercedes. Patricia smiled, as if the arrival of Raphael's ex-mother-in-law was a welcome reinforcement. Perfect. Mrs. Matilda can confirm everything I'm saying. She also spoke with Louisa's supposed former employer in Greenfield. Mrs. Matilda stepped out of the car with her usual elegance, adjusting her designer sunglasses as she observed the tense scene unfolding at the ranch entrance. Beside her, the private chauffeur waited respectfully, as if he too felt the electricity in the air. What a warm welcome, the lady commented, approaching the group. It seems I've arrived at an opportune moment. Mrs. Matilda, Raphael greeted dryly, what brings you to the ranch so early? We weren't expecting your visit. Patricia called me last night, quite distressed, she explained, casting a glance of forced sympathy at Raphael's fiancée. She said she urgently needed my help to resolve a delicate situation. Louisa felt her stomach churn. It was obvious that Patricia had orchestrated everything, the investigation, the accusations, and now Mrs. Matilda's strategic arrival to lend credibility to her lies. "Grandma!" exclaimed Clara, still clinging to Louisa's hand. "Aunt Patricia is saying mean things about Aunt Lou, but it's not true. Aunt Lou is good. She saved me from the fire." Mrs. Matilda observed her granddaughter with a calculated expression, then looked at the joined hands of the girl and the nanny. Something in her demeanor changed, a slight furrowing of her brows, a tension in her thin, perfectly painted lips. "Clara, dear, why don't you go with Mrs. Carmine and prepare some tea for Grandma? We have adult matters to discuss here." The girl hesitated, looking at Louisa as if seeking her approval. The nanny nodded gently, even fearing that without Clara's presence the situation could worsen considerably. "Go on, Clara, it's all right. We'll talk later, okay?" Reluctantly, the girl finally let go of Louisa's hand and followed Mrs. Carmine into the house, but not before casting one last worried glance at the nanny. As soon as Clara disappeared into the entrance of the main house, Patricia resumed her attack with renewed vigor. "Mrs. Matilda, we were just discussing Louisa's lies. Raphael refuses to believe that she has been deceiving us this whole time, even with all the evidence we've gathered." The lady adjusted her crocodile leather handbag on her forearm and adopted a grave expression. "Raphael, I know it's hard to accept when we've been misled, but Patricia is right. The young woman in question has a, shall we say, problematic history. I spoke personally with Eleanor Brandon, her former employer in Greenfield. The story is exactly as Patricia described, involvement with the employer, disappearing jewelry." "That's a lie," Louisa interrupted, unable to restrain herself in the face of such injustice. "I never worked for any Eleanor Brandon. I've never stolen anything from anyone in my life. Why are you doing this to me?" Raphael, who had remained silent, absorbing every word exchanged, finally spoke. "Mrs. Matilda, with all due respect, do you claim to have spoken personally with this Eleanor Brandon?" "Yes, of course," she replied, with a slight nod of impatience. "I even have her number if you wish to verify." "It won't be necessary," Raphael said, with surprising calm given the circumstances. "Do you know why?" "Because last night, while Louisa was with her mother in the ICU, I called my lawyer in Sterling City." Patricia visibly paled. "Your lawyer, why?" "Because some things didn't make sense. I asked him to check Louisa's background, previous jobs, records, everything. And do you know what he discovered in a matter of hours, even in the middle of the night?" Raphael paused dramatically, looking directly into Patricia's eyes. He discovered that Louisa really did work at the Miner's Nook restaurant and the Loose Pages bookstore, exactly as she had told me. That she never had any police record or lawsuit against her. That her mother, Mrs. Zelda Sterling, is indeed an oncology patient at Greenfield Community Hospital for over a year. Louisa felt such an intense wave of relief that her legs almost gave out. Raphael had believed her enough to investigate her story on his own, without letting himself be swayed by Patricia and Mrs. Matilda's accusations. But the most interesting thing, Raphael continued, now approaching Patricia with measured steps, is that there is no Eleanor Brandon in Greenfield who matches the description you gave. The only Eleanor Brandon registered in the city is a 92-year-old woman who has been living in a nursing home for over a decade. Patricia opened and closed her mouth several times, like a fish out of water. Mrs. Matilda maintained an impassive posture, but a slight tremor in her lips betrayed her discomfort. There must be some mistake, Patricia murmured, casting a desperate look at her ally. Mrs. Matilda, explain it to him. The lady cleared her throat, unnecessarily adjusting the pearl necklace around her neck. Well, perhaps I got confused about the name. It just so happens I spoke with so many people during my investigation. How convenient, Raphael commented with a humorless smile. And I imagine it's also a coincidence that the supposed doctor who confirmed to you that Louisa's mother doesn't have cancer, Dr. Silas Maxwell, correct, isn't listed in the records of the Regional Medical Council of Sterling City. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia seemed to have shrunk several inches, while Mrs. Matilda looked around as if seeking an escape route. Raphael, darling, you don't understand, Patricia tried, her voice now trembling. I did all this to protect you and Clara. I was worried about the influence this woman was having over you. No, Patricia, you did this out of jealousy, out of fear of losing control over me, over my daughter, over my money. The raw truth exposed made Patricia recoil as if she had been slapped. Her eyes filled with tears, not of remorse, Louisa realized, but of anger and humiliation at having been unmasked. You're in love with her, Patricia accused, with venom in her voice. You fell for the oldest trick in the book, the suffering employee who wins over the rich boss. Raphael did not deny the accusation. Instead, he looked at Louisa with an expression that made her heart race. What I feel or don't feel is none of your business, Patricia. What matters is that you lied, manipulated and slandered an innocent person purely out of self-interest. You invented stories, falsified evidence, and even involved Mrs. Matilda in your schemes. Upon hearing her name, Raphael's ex-mother-in-law seemed to awaken from a trance. She straightened her posture and assumed an air of wounded dignity. Raphael, surely you're not suggesting that I consciously participated in some kind of conspiracy? I was just as deceived as you. Patricia approached me with this information, and I, concerned for my granddaughter's well-being, merely tried to help. Louisa watched with fascination the speed with which Mrs. Matilda distanced herself from Patricia, throwing her to the wolves without the slightest remorse. It was the attitude of someone accustomed to surviving in hostile environments, preserving her own reputation at all costs. Is that true, Mrs. Matilda? Patricia asked, incredulous at her ally's betrayal. After everything we agreed upon. Mrs. Matilda's expression of innocence wavered for an instant, enough to confirm to Raphael that both had conspired together against Louisa. I think that's enough theatre for today, he declared, with an authority that silenced even Patricia. Mrs. Matilda, I appreciate your concern for Clara, but I ask that you respect my decisions as a father. As for you, Patricia, Raphael took a deep breath, as if gathering strength for what he needed to say next. Our engagement is over. I ask that you collect your belongings and leave the ranch by the end of the day. The shock on Patricia's face would have been comical if the situation hadn't been so serious. She looked from Raphael to Louisa, then to Mrs. Matilda, as if expecting someone to intervene on her behalf. When she realized she was alone, her face contorted into a mask of hatred. You'll regret this, Raphael Mendonza. Nobody breaks up with me like this. Actually, I just did exactly that, he replied, with a calm that further infuriated his ex-fiancée. And I suggest you leave without causing any more scenes. I wouldn't want Clara to witness any more of this deplorable behavior. Patricia opened her mouth to retort, but something in Raphael's firm expression made her reconsider. With one last hateful glance at Louisa, she spun on her heels and marched towards the main house, presumably to collect her belongings, but not before slamming the door hard enough to make the windows rattle. Mrs. Matilda, always attentive to the changing tides, realized that her position in the situation had become considerably complicated. She adjusted her bag on her arm and assumed a contrite expression. "Raphael, darling, I hope you understand that my actions were motivated only by concern for Clara. Helen would have wanted me to look after her daughter's well-being." The mention of Helen seemed to hit Raphael like a slap. His eyes, normally kind, hardened. "Don't use Helen's name to justify your manipulations, Mrs. Matilda. My wife would never approve of the methods you employed." "Well, perhaps I was hasty in my conclusions," the lady admitted, casting a calculated glance at Louisa. "And if I made any error in judgment, I offer my sincere apologies." "To you too, Louisa. It seems I was misinformed." Louisa watched with astonishment as the woman who, moments before, had accused her of being an opportunistic thief, now offered apologies as if commenting on the weather. The ease with which Mrs. Matilda changed her stance was frightening and revealing of her character. "I would appreciate it if you also left the ranch today," Raphael said, in a tone that allowed no argument. "Clara can visit you in Sterling City whenever she wishes, but for now I think it's best we maintain some distance." Mrs. Matilda paled slightly, but maintained her composure. "Of course, I understand perfectly. Just allow me to say goodbye to my granddaughter before I leave." Raphael nodded stiffly, and the lady walked towards the house, her back straight and her head held high, as if she were the one granting a favor by withdrawing. When they were finally alone, Raphael and Louisa remained silent for a few moments, as if processing everything that had just happened. It was he who spoke first. "I'm sorry for all of this, for having doubted you even for an instant." Louisa shook her head, feeling an indescribable emotion as she realized that despite all the lies and manipulations, the truth had finally come to light. "You had no way of knowing. Patricia was convincing." "Not as convincing as you," Raphael replied, taking a step towards her. "All it took was looking into your eyes to know there was something wrong with those accusations. That's why I asked my lawyer to investigate." "Thank you for that," Louisa murmured, feeling the tears she had held back throughout the confrontation finally threatened to fall. "For believing in me, for defending my honor, for helping my mother. You don't need to thank me. I should have trusted my instincts from the beginning, not allowed Patricia to plant doubts in my mind." At that moment, Louisa realized that something fundamental had changed between them. The barriers of social class, of employer and employee, of different pasts, seemed to have dissolved, leaving only two people who, against all odds, had found something precious in each other. "What you said to Patricia," Louisa began hesitantly, "about your feelings." Raphael took another step towards her, further closing the distance between them. "It's true," he admitted, with a simplicity that made her heart race. "I've been fighting it for months, telling myself it wasn't appropriate, that it was too soon after Helen, that there was Clara to consider. But the truth is, I can no longer deny what I feel for you." "Louisa," she wanted to respond, to say that she too had fought against her own feelings, fearing to risk the job on which her mother's treatment depended, fearing to hurt Clara if things didn't work out between them. But words seemed inadequate in the face of the emotion she felt. Before she could organize her thoughts, they were interrupted by a shout coming from the main house. "Dad! Aunt Lou, come quickly!" It was Clara, her voice filled with urgency. Raphael and Louisa exchanged a worried glance and ran towards the house. They found the girl in the living room, beside the telephone, with an expression that mixed shock and indignation. "What happened, Clara?" Raphael asked, kneeling to be at his daughter's height. "Aunt Patricia was on the phone," the girl explained, pointing to the device. "She didn't see me entering the room. She was talking to someone, saying that she was going to sue you, that she was going to ruin the ranch, that she was going to tell all the newspapers that Dad was having an affair with the nanny." Raphael closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control his irritation. Even defeated, Patricia still tried to cause harm. "Don't worry about that, dear. Aunt Patricia is upset right now, but she'll soon realize that these threats lead nowhere. But she said horrible things about Aunt Lou. She said she was going to make everyone believe that she stole you from Aunt Patricia." Louisa felt her face burn. The situation was spiraling out of control, with Clara in the middle of an adult dispute she shouldn't witness. "Clara, Don't believe anything you heard, she said, kneeling beside Raphael. Sometimes when people are angry, they say things that aren't true. The girl looked from Louisa to her father, an expression of confusion on her small face. But is it true that Aunt Patricia isn't going to marry Daddy anymore? That she's leaving the ranch? Raphael hesitated only an instant before answering honestly, Yes, dear. I realized it wouldn't be a good marriage for any of us, especially for you. Clara processed the information for a few seconds, then, to both their surprise, a radiant smile lit up her face. So, Aunt Lou is going to keep living here. We're not moving to Sterling City, and I'm not going to a boarding school? No, Clara. None of that is going to happen, Raphael assured, stroking his daughter's hair. This is our home, and here we will stay. As for Aunt Lou? He looked at Louisa, a silent question in his eyes. I'll stay as long as you want me here, she replied, feeling emotion tighten her throat. I promised, remember? Clara threw herself into their arms, creating a collective hug that sealed, at that moment, a new beginning for the three of them. Raphael took advantage of the closeness to whisper in Louisa's ear, We need to talk. About us? She nodded discreetly, knowing there was much to be said, much to be decided. But at that moment, with Clara between them, everything seemed possible. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of events. Patricia left the ranch in a storm of accusations and threats, swearing they would regret it. Mrs. Matilda departed soon after, not without first attempting a strategic reconciliation with Raphael, who politely but firmly maintained his decision for temporary distance. That night, with Clara finally asleep after the day's emotional exhaustion, Raphael and Louisa met on the porch of the main house, under a starry sky that seemed to reflect the clarity they had finally reached in their hearts. I don't know where to begin, Raphael admitted, serving 2 cups of hot tea. This day was intense? Louisa suggested, accepting the cup with a tired smile. To say the least, he agreed, sitting in the rocking chair beside her, but also clarifying, as if a fog had dissipated, revealing what had been before me all along. Louisa felt her heart quicken at his words. And what did you see when the fog dissipated? Raphael placed his cup on the small table beside him and turned to face her directly. I saw you, Louisa. I saw the brave woman who entered a burning barn to save my daughter, the patient woman who brought Clara back to life after years of sadness, the dedicated woman who works tirelessly to save her sick mother, the woman who, without me realizing it, rekindled something in me that I thought I had lost forever when Helen left. If you need help with doctors, treatments, I know specialists who— Please, Patricia interrupted, raising her hand. I didn't come here for that. I don't deserve your kindness, Raphael. Not after everything I've done. A solitary tear rolled down the businesswoman's once impeccable face. For the first time, Louisa saw beyond the perfect facade, beyond the calculating and manipulative woman. She saw only a frightened person facing her own mortality. The illness made me rethink a lot of things, Patricia continued, discreetly wiping away the tear. I realized I spent my entire life chasing things that don't really matter. Status, money, power. I manipulated people, lied, hurt those who didn't deserve it, all to maintain an image, a social position. Raphael exchanged a glance with Louisa before finally sitting down opposite his ex-fiancée. Not close enough to suggest intimacy, but enough to show that he was willing to listen to her. What exactly did you come here to do today, Patricia? He asked, direct but not hostile. 3 things, she replied, straightening in the armchair as if gathering her last reserves of dignity. First, as I said, to apologize. To you, Raphael, for having tried to turn our relationship into a business transaction, for never having truly cared about what was important to you. This ranch, your connection to the land, and especially Clara. She then turned to Louisa, her eyes now moist. And to you, Louisa, for having slandered your name, for having invented lies about you and your mother, for having tried to destroy something genuine and pure out of sheer envy. I was petty, cruel, and unfair. Louisa nodded silently, touched by Patricia's apparent sincerity, but still cautious after so many manipulations. Second, the businesswoman continued, I came to publicly retract myself. I have already sent letters to the main newspapers in the region and in Sterling City, admitting that I spread false rumors about the 2 of you, motivated by jealousy and spite. I don't know if they will publish them, but at least the truth will be on record. Raphael's eyes widened, clearly surprised by this gesture. You didn't have to go that far, Patricia. The comments would eventually die down naturally over time. Yes, I did, she insisted. The damage I caused to Louisa's reputation could follow her forever, especially when she opens her school. People need to know the truth. Louisa felt a tightening in her throat. How did Patricia know about the school? As if reading her thoughts, the businesswoman continued. That brings me to the third reason for my visit. She picked up the folder that was on the coffee table and handed it to Louisa. It's a donation for your school. Confused, Louisa opened the folder and found legal documents and a check for an amount that made her eyes widen. Patricia, this is a lot of money. I can't accept it. You can and you should, the businesswoman insisted. Consider it restitution for the harm I caused. Furthermore, the Nolan Foundation for Rural Education will be honored to be the first official sponsor of the Willow Creek Rural School. Raphael, who was looking over Louisa's shoulder, was equally astonished. You created a foundation? A sad smile crossed Patricia's face. As I said, illness changes our perspectives. I realized I wouldn't leave any positive legacy in this world if I were to pass away tomorrow. Just businesses, properties, bank accounts. Nothing that truly mattered. Nothing that made a difference in anyone's life. She took a deep breath before continuing. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctors are optimistic, but no one has guarantees. So I decided to use what I have, money, influence, contacts, for something that truly makes a difference. Rural education has always been neglected in this country. I thought perhaps this was a way to compensate a little for the harm I caused. Louisa looked at the documents in her hands, then at Raphael, then back at Patricia. It was difficult to reconcile this vulnerable and reflective woman with the calculating and manipulative person she had known before. I don't know what to say, she finally admitted. Don't say anything, Patricia replied, standing up as if she felt she had lingered too long. Just use the money to do good, to build something beautiful and meaningful, something I was never capable of doing. She walked to the door, stopping only to add, Oh, and tell Clara I left a gift for her with Mrs. Carmine, a book about hummingbirds. I heard she found a nest and thought it might help her care for the chicks when they hatch. The fact that Patricia had remembered this detail, that she had cared enough to bring an appropriate gift for Clara, moved Louisa more than any formal apology could have. Patricia, she called before the businesswoman left. Thank you, and I sincerely hope you recover. A genuine smile briefly lit up Patricia's tired face. Me too, Louisa. I still have a lot to fix. With these words, Raphael's ex-fiancée left the main house, getting into her luxurious car that awaited her at the entrance. Louisa and Raphael remained silent for a few moments, processing what had just happened. Do you believe her? Louisa finally asked, still holding the donation documents. Raphael considered the question carefully before responding. I think so. Illness changes people. It makes them confront their own mortality, rethink their priorities. I saw that happen with my father years ago. Louisa nodded, remembering her own anguish upon discovering Mrs. Zelda's diagnosis. What do we do with this, then? She asked, indicating the donation. We accept it, Raphael replied simply, and we use it to build something good, something that helps many children. We transform a story of hurt into a story of hope. Isn't that what you always wanted to do? Turn negative into positive. Louisa smiled, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The circle seemed to close. From the fire that had almost taken Clara's life, her love for Raphael was born. From Patricia's lies and manipulations, now arose an opportunity to realize her dream as an educator. Should we tell Clara about Patricia's visit? She asked as they walked back to the orchard, where the girl was waiting with Mrs. Zelda. Yes, but carefully, Raphael replied, intertwining his fingers with hers. She needs to understand that people can change, that forgiveness is possible, even after great mistakes. These are important lessons for life. In the orchard, they found Clara and Mrs. Zelda examining the hummingbird nest together, animatedly discussing how to care for the eggs until the chicks hatched. Seeing them approach, the girl ran towards them. So, was Aunt Patricia mean again? She asked with the characteristic frankness of children. Raphael knelt to be at his daughter's height. No, Clara. Actually, she came to apologize. And she brought you a gift, a book about hummingbirds to help you care for the nest. The surprise on the girl's face was evident. Really? She's not mad at Aunt Lou anymore? No, dear. In fact, she made a very generous donation to Aunt Lou's school. She's sick, you know. And that made her think a lot about life, about what truly matters. Clara absorbed the information with the seriousness that sometimes surprised the adults around her. Like Grandma Zelda was sick? Yes, something similar, Raphael confirmed, choosing simple words to explain a complex situation. And sometimes, when people get sick, they start to see the world differently. They realize they fought over things that weren't so important. The girl nodded as if that made perfect sense to her. So she's not going to try to separate you anymore. Nor send me to a school in Sterling City. No, Clara, none of that is going to happen, Louisa assured, joining Raphael beside the girl. In fact, Aunt Patricia wants to help build the school here on the ranch for you and for other children in the region. Clara considered this for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, her face lit up with a smile. So she became good inside. The profound simplicity of the question made the adults exchange an emotional glance. That was exactly it. Patricia was trying to become good inside, regardless of what happened with her physical illness. I think so, Clara, Louisa replied. She's trying. Then we should pray for her to get better from cancer too, the girl decided, with the straightforward logic of children. Just like we pray for Grandma Zelda. Mrs. Zelda, who had been listening to the conversation in silence, smiled emotionally. That's right, my dear. We should always wish well, even for those who have harmed us in the past. That's how we ourselves become good inside. That afternoon marked a turning point in the lives of the inhabitants of Willow Creek Ranch. Patricia's unexpected visit, far from bringing more conflicts as they feared, had brought a necessary closure, a chance for forgiveness and reconciliation that would allow everyone to move forward, without the weight of resentment. 6 months later, on a sunny spring morning, the Willow Creek Rural School officially opened its doors. The courtyard, decorated with colorful flags and wildflowers, was filled with smiling children. Children of the ranch hands and neighboring properties, all excited at the prospect of studying in such a beautiful and welcoming place. Louisa, elegant in a simple but beautiful dress, cut the inaugural ribbon with Clara by her side, proudly holding a sign with the school's name. Raphael watched the scene, his heart overflowing with pride and love. Among the guests at the ceremony, familiar faces mingled with new friends. Mrs. Zelda, now in cancer remission, chatted animatedly with Mrs. Carmine about plans for a community garden at the school. Dr. Paul Randall, who had treated Louisa's mother and was now the project's health consultant, explained to a group of parents the importance of nutritional education, and to the surprise of many, Mrs. Matilda, who after much reflection and a sincere apology, had been slowly reintegrated into Clara's life, though with clear boundaries set by Raphael. In a more secluded corner, sitting in the shade of a trumpet tree, a fragile but determined figure watched the celebration with a serene smile. Patricia Nolan, visibly affected by chemotherapy treatment, but with a sparkle in her eyes that spoke of inner peace and renewed purpose. Beside her, a young assistant from the Nolan Foundation for Rural Education took notes on the event and discussed plans to expand the project to other rural areas of the state. After the official speeches and the children's presentations, while the guests enjoyed the snacks prepared by Mrs. Carmine, Louisa approached Patricia. "Thank you for coming," she said sincerely. "It means a lot to us, to me, that you are here today." Patricia smiled, adjusting the colorful scarf that now covered her hairless head. "I wouldn't miss it for anything. To see this dream becoming a reality, it's as if a part of me is also being redeemed." "How's the treatment going?" Louisa asked, sitting beside her. "Difficult," Patricia admitted without self-pity, "but the doctors are optimistic. And I'm learning a lot on this journey, about strength, about vulnerability, about what truly matters." At that moment, Clara approached timidly, holding something in her hands. "Aunt Patricia, I made this for you," she said, extending a small package. Patricia carefully opened the gift, revealing a framed drawing, a colorful hummingbird flying over vibrant flowers with the words, "Thank you for the book," written in the girl's childish handwriting. "It's beautiful, Clara," Patricia said, genuinely touched. "I'll put it in my office at the foundation, to remind me every day of what we are building here." The girl smiled, hesitated a moment, and then surprised everyone by giving Patricia a spontaneous hug. "I hope you get better soon," she whispered, before running back to the other children. Patricia's eyes filled with tears that she did not try to hide. "That's the magic of children, isn't it? That ability to forgive, to see the best in people, even after everything. That's why it's worth fighting for them," Louisa agreed. "For that clear gaze, that unwavering hope in the future." Raphael joined them, affectionately placing his hand on Louisa's shoulder. "The children are asking for Director Louisa to tell a story." "It seems you have fans," Louisa smiled, standing up. "Duty calls." "Excuse me, Patricia." "Go, Director," the businesswoman replied with a nod. "Your students are waiting." As Louisa walked away to attend to the children's request, Raphael remained for a moment with Patricia. "I never had the opportunity to thank you properly," he said, sitting in the spot Louisa had just left, "not just for the donation, but for making things right, for giving Louisa the chance to fulfill her dream without the shadow of rumors and slanders." Patricia shook her head gently. "Don't thank me, Raphael. Just promise you'll take good care of her. Louisa is man special, the kind of person the world desperately needs. Someone who sees beauty and possibilities where others see only difficulties and obstacles." "I promise," he replied, with a solemnity that made the seriousness of the commitment clear. In the center of the courtyard, Louisa had gathered all the children in a large circle and began to tell a story. The story of a fire that had almost destroyed everything, but which, mysteriously and unexpectedly, ended up igniting the most important flame of all, that of true love, renewed hope, the possibility of starting anew. The children listened, fascinated, their eyes shining with the magic of the narrative. Raphael watched the scene with a full heart, his daughter happy and safe, the woman he loved, fulfilling her dream. His ranch, once again a place of life and joy. Beside him, Patricia also contemplated the scene with a serene smile. "Do you know what impresses me most about this whole story, Raphael?" "What?" "How something as destructive as a fire could, in the end, bring so much good. It's as if from the ashes something even more beautiful and stronger than what existed before could be born," Raphael completed, his eyes fixed on Louisa, who was now showing the children how the trumpet trees bloomed more vibrantly after fires, how nature had its own way of being reborn after destruction. At that moment, with the spring sun bathing Willow Creek Ranch and the sound of children's laughter filling the air, Raphael was certain they too had been reborn from the ashes, and the future that lay ahead, with Louisa, Clara, the school, and everyone who had become part of that incredible journey, was brighter and more promising than any of them had ever dared to dream. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Louisa and Raphael's story has warmed your hearts. To continue this journey of emotions, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about new beginnings and second chances. Find it here by clicking on the left. If this narrative touched your soul, be sure to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Daily we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the beauty of human feelings. Share your own stories of overcoming challenges in the comments. We'd love to hear them. Until the next emotional journey,